welcome to the Facebook Live interview series of the Order Sons and Daughters of Italians in America. This is season 3, episode 10. I'm your guest host, author Andrew Cotto. I am joined tonight by my co-host, Mary from Ohio, who is an OSDIA member and a regular contributor to all their cultural activities. We also have in the DC headquarters of the OSDIA, Justin, who's our moderator. Hi, Justin.
Hey, how are you?
And hi, Mary. Hear me? Justin is going to be watching the screen down below, so if you want to ask questions of our very special guest, please put them in, and we will get some time during our interview to ask him. Him in question is a cultural icon of American kitchens, Rocco DiSpirito. Rocco, thanks for joining us.
Hey, everybody. How are you? Nice to see you. Thanks for having me, Andrew.
Of course, it's a pleasure. Always great to see you. And I love your backdrop there. I'm feeling inadequate here.
My tablecloth jacket. You're talking about
the whole getup here is really inspiring some envy in me.
Yeah, this is an old tablecloth from one of my nonna's backyard parties.
Well,
she used to staple this to the table.
Oh, really? Looks in pretty good shape, so congratulations on that. Thanks for taking the time to join us tonight. It's an honor to have you with us. And, I wanted to start by not asking you a question per se, but making a comparison, which I think you're going to like. Feel free to let me know if you disagree, but I consider you the Springsteen of American kitchens. You like that one?
I'm embarrassed. I like it.
You're
so
embarrassed.
much.
Let me explain. Yeah. Let me explain. We'll see. Oh, look! What a coincidence!
My signed copy right behind me.
Your signed copy right behind you.
Yeah, love this guy. That's a very generous comparison. I don't deserve it, but I'm happy to take it if you're going to just give it out cheaply.
It's not cheaply. You earned it. Let me explain. My feeling about what makes Springsteen so iconic is not just the depth of his career, but the breadth of it too, right? And the guy's been a figure in American culture for 50 years, right? Now I realize you couldn't be a figure in American culture that long at your age, but you've been a figure in our lives in America culturally for 25 years, right? And your presence in the world of cuisine is not just deep, but it's broad, right? We met you as a restaurant chef, as a star at Union Pacific. Moving on to Rocco's, you were the original primetime reality TV star, right? In the early aughts. You've pivoted from there to TV appearances regularly. I see you on TV, more than anyone else, it seems like to me. Also, you have products. You make your own products. You have clients who you cook for, right? And I think most importantly, and probably most surprising, right, to many people out there, is that you're a prolific cookbook author. Right? You have a dozen cookbooks. They're all
yeah.
It's the DiSpirito library of cookbooks, and even the cookbooks themselves have a range in them that really covers the American canon of cuisine. Right? From the obvious, the cookbooks are set in Italy and traditional foods that you grew up with, and we first met you preparing in many ways, right? To the gourmet things you've done, but also to more of late to healthier sort of variations. And I'm curious, right? What inspired, right, this sort of turn towards what one might call healthy eating, though I don't like that term, but to health-based cuisine.
Well, thank you for the incredibly generous setup there. I don't think there's a star I respect and admire more than Springsteen. I'm going to have to work another 30 years at least to earn that. But I do appreciate the comparison that, I've done a lot of things that have interested me, and they've, it started with this book, and this is my latest book, and there are 13 in between. And they're still all about flavor. The reason I call it my first book Flavor is because a couple of years into Union Pacific, I realized that the work I do with food had one sort of common thread, and it was this focus on flavor and exciting flavors and tension and resolution that comes with, really great flavor combinations, and experimenting with flavors and ingredients is sort of what's always excited me from even my first job in a pizzeria at 12 years old to working for Grey Kunz at L'Espinasse and in my own restaurant at Union Pacific, and to this day with cookbooks and TV, creating memories with great flavor combinations is what has always inspired me. And it ultimately comes from the work and ingredients. And, I look at onions and I get ideas, I don't just see the drudgery of peeling onions. I see possibilities. And then, of course, the interaction with people. The interaction with people was the first thing I felt in the pizzeria on Sutphin Boulevard in Queens. And back then I was just serving sliced pizza and fountain soda. But I realized that interaction with the customer is very magical and full of possibility, and very can expand your life and horizons. And it was for me a view to what life could be as a 12-year-old growing up in a very small community of Jamaica, Queens. Even though Queens is huge, my community was very small, and I hadn't seen a lot of the world yet. And working in restaurants helped open the doors to the rest of the world, and continue to do so every day until now. And so between the ingredients, the flavors, and the people, there's a lot to be inspired by.
Sure. Now, at what point, though, and again, I don't want to seem, cliche or using the wrong terminology. When did your palate or your interest in sharing, these flavors start trending towards, what one might consider, health-based as a first priority?
Yeah, in 2006, I published my first book, Now Eat This, and it was all about transforming comfort foods that you know and love into healthy versions of themselves. And it'd been what I was doing in my personal life. Direct connection to my personal life. Out of the restaurant for 1 year, I discovered that I had time to ride a bike, I had time to run, I had time to learn how to swim. I started to get into triathlons, and I realized I had to eat differently, and so I changed how I ate and got cut dairy, gluten, sugar, alcohol. I've since learned how to eat some of those things again, but for a triathlete, nutrition is very important. And about a year into it, I started to complete the triathlons. You don't always finish them. So after a year of struggling with a very hard sport, I started to actually complete them. And it was a huge, it was like winning them to me, just to be able to cross the finish line. And a lot of it was thanks to nutrition. And I sort of thought to myself, I've cracked the code with these ingredients and this new way of cooking, the same big flavor combinations and ambitious ideas with cooking, but just healthier ingredients, better ingredients. And in 2006, no one was really talking about it in the chef world. Now every chef has a healthy cookbook out, but 2006 it was pretty novel. So the decline of my health in my personal life, and my excitement for a sport that just seemed impossible was what inspired me to get into healthy cooking and then talk about it in books. And I published 9 healthy cookbooks since.
Yeah, that sport is impossible, by the way.
Totally impossible. It's crazy, right? I don't know why anybody even starts it. The whole thing is so much fun. Between the gear and the people, it's super fun.
Yeah, if you say so. And
by the way, you look like you've been doing a few triathlons. What have you been doing? Because when I met you, you were in good shape, but not this level of good shape. You're like Ninja Warrior level right now.
Yeah, I'm working on it. What else
Clearly,
locked in my basement?
Clearly you're working on it. You're not eating carbonara every night, I can tell you that.
No, though when I do, I enjoy it immensely.
Yeah.
And you should be applauded for being at the forefront of these trends in cooking and making them not like diet, right, but like healthier eating patterns. And I really admire that, with keto. And you introduced me to plant-based eating, and I was stunned when we were meeting for our first dinner ever, and we were meeting at one of Matthew Kenny's, plant-based restaurants. And I was like, wow,
yeah,
Rocco DiSpirito, and we're eating plants.
I know. You make fun of me at the time. I remember it well. Remember, I wanted to take you to 000 first for plant-based pizza, for vegan pizza. Yeah. I think you made fun of me heartily, and then it was closed, and we went to his Mexican place right next door, and you were blown away. I remember you being recognizably surprised by the food after the first bite.
I mean, it changed the way I eat, right? But look, I want to pivot back again.
Yeah, it's stuck, right?
Absolutely. It wasn't like I had to do it 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. It was just, something, a new wrinkle into my eating habits, which helped immensely. But let's go back in time. I'm going to pivot to a question from Mary here about your background in food, if you don't mind.
So thank you very much for joining us tonight. It's a pleasure to have you on our show.
My pleasure, Dr. Mary, right? Dr. Mary. Yes. Your last name disappeared now on Zoom, so I don't know what it is.
You just Dr.
Just call me Mary.
I always use the doctor term for doctors because they work so hard to get where they are. And I have so much respect for anyone who's studied for that amount of years. So.
Well, thank you very much. As a first generation Italian American with a love for food, what is one of your favorite memories growing up in an Italian kitchen?
So many. Wow. You know the feeling, right? You're first generation as well, I think, or second. I can't remember.
Second.
We were just talking about it earlier. First or second?
Second.
Okay, so you grew up with a nonna around, right?
Yes. Yes.
So the things I remember most are her yelling at us a lot. But the things that are my favorite memories are not her yelling at us or throwing the spoon at us, still hot with sauce on it. Is all the gardening and the home made foods. My grandmother bought very little from the supermarket. She made everything and grew everything. She literally had not just a cherry tree, but 2 kinds of cherry trees and 2 kinds of pear trees and blackberries and 3 kinds of blackberries and 4 kinds of lettuces and not just chickens, but chickens and pheasant and pigeon and quail. I mean, it was crazy. She didn't have a large area on Long Island. She had, what would be considered a modest home, but she did have a plot of land that she worked 24/7, 365 days a year. We had an area where we could sleep under the grapevines. I remember those naps so well. They were unbelievably satisfying. And I remember all the fresh foods so vividly. I remember her going and collecting ingredients for even just a frittata or just fried eggs. And, it would be a ristra of garlic that she made hanging in the garage, for the perfect humidity, and peppers that she had ripening on the floor in the garage on some wood, and eggs directly from the chicken coop. And she would gather all these things and bring me into the kitchen and sit me down and, take a bottle of olive oil a bottle that I recognized used to contain water or wine or something else, because a glass bottle was never thrown away, it was recycled endlessly. And I remember pouring, what seemed like a gallon of olive oil in a big pan and breaking 6 eggs in a pan and whole cloves of garlic. And I used to think, who's going to eat all this? And I would sit there and eat all of it, even at like 5 or 6 years old. So those are some of my favorite memories, sitting across the table from my grandmother, Anna Maria, eating her, like harvest and home cooked food on the spot. It was wonderful. She would never eat. It's very odd. She would just watch me eat. And I think I understand what that feels like now. But, as a cook, you tend to enjoy watching people eat the food you make more than eating it yourself. So that's definitely one of my most fond memories. I do remember an odd day where a neighbor complained about a rooster and his cock-a-doodle-doodling. And I remember her running into I don't want to upset anyone, but I remember running in and taking care of that problem on the spot, like it was like she had practiced it 1,000 times. And it turns out she had. So.
That's fantastic. I love that. How did that inspire you?
Murder and fresh food. It's a great combination.
It's garage to table.
Andrew with the pun master flash over there.
Hey, I need company, so I've been practicing.
How did that inspire your career?
So I think I've been training and trained for my career ever since I was born. I was surrounded by, you guys know it, if you're Italian and you're first or second generation, the setup, right? It's a lot of family members who all like fight to cook every night and are growing something or making something. They're either making their own wine or their own ham or baking their own bread or preserving tomatoes, on Labor Day weekend. It was a circus of food and cooks and activity all surrounded around food. And I also remember them giving food away a lot and receiving food a lot. And in Italy today, they still live like that. So I think I was inspired, and literally in training as far back as I can remember. My first memories are watching my mom and grandmother and aunts and uncles cooking. While I suffered from a little bit of the typical first generation ethnic self-loathing, I went to France first before Italy to learn. Actually, that's not true. I went to France after Italy, but I spent 2 years plus in France learning how to cook. And I sort of, denied my heritage for a long time. And then, of course, came back and realized that that was the best thing about me, and embraced it. And I wrote this book, actually. This is all about my Italian-American heritage. It's my mom and me and her recipes. A lot like your grandmother book. This was about salvaging my mom's recipes before they were gone. So I think I've been training for being a chef for a long time. My family were hospitality workers, whether they realized it or not. Many of them did actually work in food. Like my mom was a lunch lady, at a local school in Queens. My uncle was a butcher. My other uncle was a tailor, but we don't talk about him enough, or too much. Yeah, that background just puts you in a place where you're thinking about food a lot. So it was a natural fit for me. And it was also the only place you could get hired at 12 years old. The only industry that'll hire a 12-year-old is the restaurant industry, right? You're not going to get, an internship at Google at 12. So.
And you went straight from high school into cooking school, correct?
I was in cooking school in high school because I took the supplemental program. It was called BOCES. And I was working in restaurants all through high school. I never stopped working in the restaurant business from 12 on. And then, my brother looked at my credits and said, if you really want to go learn how to cook, you should go work in restaurants. So you should probably take some summer school courses and get out of high school. So I did that, and I graduated a year early just so I could go cook faster. And that worked out well. I got into the Culinary Institute a year later, and that's the school up in Hyde Park, New York. Not New Hyde Park, where my family lived. And that was, game changing, of course, for me. I was just turning 17 when I entered that school. And in 1984, the Culinary Institute of America was like one of two only places you could go to get, the full experience of what it's like to interact with chefs and cooks, and in an institution that was revered like the school is, and with the level of professionalism. And it was, just like, wow, who knew? I thought I knew a little bit from my 3 or 4 years of working in the restaurant business, but that was, sort of local pizzerias, and I hadn't really seen enough. I did sneak in before I went to cooking school, I did sneak in a summer and a semester in Israel, where I worked in a huge hotel in a place a lot like Southampton. That was super eye-opening too. I remember my first night there, we had a wedding for 2,000 people. That was my entree to hotel workers, the hotel working industry. Pretty fun.
I need to hear that story one night over dinner.
It's a good story.
Before I pivot to Justin for some questions from the audience, I did reference, I did hear you mention sauce, right? And one of the requirements of this program, I think it's a good time to sort of pivot to it right now, is to ask our guests who are culinary background if their family called it sauce or gravy.
You're not asking me that, are you?
I am.
Really, are you trying to start trouble, or?
No, just a one-word answer will do, or you can elaborate if you so choose.
Families break up over this. This is yeah. So if you're in Italy, they use the word salsa or ragu, and I don't know of an Italian equivalent to gravy. So just gonna throw that out there.
All right, we're gonna call that an answer. We're gonna move away.
I think gravy is an Italian-American idiom for sauce, and there's nothing wrong with it, but I don't know that's entirely accurate.
Thank you for that. Well handled too, by the way. Justin, we have a question from the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
sauce or gravy, buddy? First you answer that.
Sugo.
First you answer.
We go.
Sugo, yeah, that's
sugo.
the other word. Yeah, sugo. Yeah, there you go.
No surprise here, Rocco. Everyone is, heaping praise on you, and they're so glad to see you in this interview. And numerous people are writing in how much they love your cookbooks and have loved your appearances over the years. So I think no surprise from us on that.
Thank you, guys.
But a question that's come up multiple times, and I know I know we talked about it on the pre-show a little bit, And I've heard you talk about it on other interviews with some funny anecdotes along the way, but where is your family from in Italy? You mentioned your parents came over. Where did they come from?
So they both came from the same village called San Nicolo Baronia, Sanicola Baronia. It's a tiny hilltop village west of Avellino and or west of Salerno, sorry, and well, I guess all the hills are west of Salerno, but they always mention Avellino and Salerno for some reason, I guess because they're close. And one of my uncles worked in Salerno, and they lived next door to each other their entire lives. And then, of course, when they got married, they lived next door to each other, and that's where they and almost my entire immediate family comes from. It's a small group of people. DNA is, very limited. So we're doing okay, though. We're okay. But there are literally 4 last names. That's
the
it.
bloodline has survived. There you go. Do you have a favorite dish from Campania? And I'll kind of preface
so
that.
Many, yeah.
I know it's a hard question, and
Yeah.
I'll preface this with, do you have a favorite pasta shape and then a pairing for that particular pasta shape?
We were talking about my favorite pasta earlier. So my favorite pasta is spaghetti aglio olio. It's literally what my mom made as, the go-to comfort food. We were talking about whether you put Parmesan or Reggiano on top, and I'd say no, and my mom would say no, and most Italian chefs would say no. But of course, if you want to, it's no big deal. But my favorite cut, and I think it's from Campania, but I'm not sure, is paccheri. They make, a famous dish with paccheri there, and it's just basically meat and onion sauce, and I love that dish a lot. Maybe Andrew knows the exact origin, but paccheri is like sort of it looks like calamari bodies. It looks like
a large rigatoni almost.
A very large rigatoni. Yeah, it's got a very toothsome. It's paccheri, and it's delicious, and you can cook it for days, and it never overcooks.
You know what? That's actually in my top 3 favorite shapes as well. And a fun fact about pacchero is in Neapolitan means to slap. So that's where the name comes from. Oh,
there you go. Yeah. There you go. Nice tidbit there.
Very little fun fact. I got even a broken clock is right twice a day. I have a few up my sleeve. So we can go back to Andrew for the moment.
I think we're going to transition back to Mary for another question, if I'm not mistaken.
Sounds great. So my parents grew up on the same street as well. That's how they met.
Oh, cool. Very cool. I think that's how a lot of Italian families met, right? They were sort of, who's your neighbor? Okay, that'll do. He has a job. Does he have a profession? Oh, great, done.
So I understand you've taken on a number of initiatives during the pandemic. Can you tell us what you did and what the outcomes were?
Sure. So obviously there's a lot of advocating and a lot of charity work and a lot of other types of work that came up during the pandemic, and other than several major issues that we don't need to get into now, there was a lot of campaigning, a lot of advocacy work needed for the restaurant industry. The restaurant industry is the number 2 employer in the United States after the government, and never gets bailed out. So we're always left to suffer in silence on our own. And so Tom Colicchio and Chef Jose Andres started the Independent Restaurant Coalition, and a bunch of other people, Phil Baltz and Will Guidara. And while they did 99.9% of the work, I was able to help out here and there with an appearance on Fox and some other, social media support. But they actually were able to get our bill passed. The Restaurant Act is now in the $1.9 trillion Recovery Act, and we didn't get the 128 billion we asked for, but we got 28 billion, which will be the difference between three generations of family businesses staying opening or remaining open or closing for good. There's only so much you can put up with as even a restaurateur who has, strong appetite for adversity and a stomach and a strong stomach to deal with it. Many of them were just like, the hell with this, like enough is enough, because there's just no breaks for us. The minute there's a recession, the airline industry gets $50 billion. They employ 15,000 people. We employ 20, 30 million people. And then up and down the food chain and the supply chain, we're literally interacting with somewhere in the 40 to 60 million people range. That's an enormous amount of commerce. And restaurants are the bedrock of communities. We're the corner store for many communities in cities and in suburban neighborhoods. And we're usually the first employer for most people. So we can't let restaurants fail. We can't let the restaurant community fail. And the majority of restaurants are independently owned and not chain owned. And that's where we really focus, because the PPP was, basically eaten up by large chains, and restaurants with under, 50 employees or chains with under 300 employees, which is a very small group, got pushed out. And so we had to ask and advocate for a special fund for us, and we got it done, which is incredible. And there was just recently a Zoom with the political people who are now in charge of it, and it's going to start in April, and hopefully by the end of April or May there'll be funds distributed. And these are grants; these are not loans, so they're not loans of any kind. There'll be no repayment, which you can have your view about how the government helps society, and I'm sure there's many different views of those for those who are watching, but the restaurant industry, through no fault of its own, has suffered immensely. And we're usually the first people back in the shop working to get food on the table and feed people. We're also usually the first to feed frontline workers and donate an enormous amount of time and money and food, and we did a lot of that during the pandemic. So we're thrilled that we were able to get a little recognition, and hopefully this will save a lot of business. I mean, it's going to be game changing for me, for sure. And I know at least 100 other chefs who are counting on these funds to make moving forward possible.
Justin, imagine you're having the busiest night of your moderating career.
There's just a few questions coming in, just a few.
You want to pivot back to one more of them?
Yeah, we'll do. I think our previous questions about Italy and your favorite food got people wondering. And our Sons of Italy Foundation president, Joe Shami, was wondering, outside of Campania, do you have a favorite region for eating in Italy?
Tuscany, for sure, would be at the top of that list. Tuscany is one I've traveled to the most outside of Campania. It's hard to beat Campania, though.
Yeah,
Joe. I have been to Sicily a few times, and also, every region in Italy is amazing. So let's just start there. There is no bad food. There are no bad cooks. There are no bad products. Italy is a miracle. I mean, the fact that they're able to be a modern society with while holding on to all the old-fashioned routines that make everyday life work so well is incredible. I mean, they still have their mezzogiorno meal and rest, which is incredible, and they still eat at home most nights of the week, and most people cook at home, and most people are growing food of their own or buying locally grown food. It's an incredible society with incredible results. People, when it comes to food and everyday happiness and the satisfaction, I would imagine that they rate very high. And if you look at the work I've done with health and wellness, their obesity rate is a fraction of ours. So obviously all that home cooking and all that local food works well. So I did go to Pisa once, and I visited the Martelli pasta factory in Pisa, and the Martelli family, who still owns and operates it, were very generous. And it's probably one of my most memorable Italian dishes, and it's to this day one of my favorites. It was cavatelli with pesto rosso. So pesto rosso is, as the name implies, a tomato-based pesto, and it's garlic, anchovy, tomato, and basil, and that's it. And boy, was it just like lights out good, lights out. They made it in front of me. They let me help plate it. We sat down to eat it. I thought this is going to be another great Italian meal. It was life-changing. It was so good. I had to put it in my first book. Let me see if I can find a picture of it. Just one of those life-changing moments where I watched them make basically a room temperature sauce and add it to pasta without ever touching a pan, which is, basically how they do most of their pastas. So this is the pesto rosso. It goes through a food mill, which I learned how to use in Italy, and to this day, one of my favorite appliances. But this dish right here it's just insane. Orecchiette, sorry, it's orecchiette, not cavatelli. And what's cool about the Martelli family is they dry their pasta super slow, so their pastas don't overcook and they taste great. And they're using Gragnano and amazing durum semolina. And I remember the statistic that they gave me at the time was they dry in 1 year what Barilla dries in an hour or something like that. And it was very impactful because you could really taste the difference. And there's some great pastas available. Back then it wasn't available in the United States. The yellow bags, the very expensive yellow bags were, only at very, exclusive shops. Now it's widely available, and there are many other great dry pastas available now. And so it's a lot's changed in the 20 years since I wrote that book and went to the Martelli family in Pisa. Sorry. Dario Cecchini is a particularly wonderful memory. I visited him a few times. Once before he was well known with Faith Wellinger, who's a great food writer who's lived in Italy for the last 25 years, lived in writing from Italy for a long time. If you ever go to Florence, look her up. She will take all comers and bring you to Dario and introduce you to him. And he's, of course, a famous butcher from Panzano in Tuscany. And his steak, his meats, his grilling techniques, his potato, everything he makes is just wonderful. And he's, the sort of archetypical Italian character, in my opinion. He, lives and breathes hospitality, joy, he exudes joy. He loves cooking, even though he wanted to be an architect, and he had to take over the family business after his father died, untimely death of his father. It's a great story. But if you're going to Italy, go visit him. He'll give you everything you want from a trip to Italy. Great food, great personalities, memories that'll last a lifetime. So his steak, his bistecca alla Fiorentina was, game changing for me because he raises his own cattle. He butchers them himself, and he grills it the proper way. Only seasons it at the end with salt and olive oil, which is, their way of doing it. That's pretty memorable. And then I remember he had roasted potatoes that were insanely delicious. The thing about Italy is you can get a carrot in Italy that will blow your mind and have you asking yourself, well, where have these carrots been my whole life? Why does celery taste 100x better in Italy than it does in the United States? It's incredible. I mean, they're the terra that they have, the terroir that they have is extraordinary. It's all mountain soil from, that's been fed from lava flows and a million years of mountain water and rain. And it's just incredible what they have there. Andrew, did I hit some of your faves? I think one or two of those is one of your faves.
You're killing me, man. And I have a funny Dario anecdote. I know Dario well too. And I've been there dozens of times and spent 2 of my significant birthdays there, my 40th and 50th with him. And my favorite thing that he makes is his beans. He makes white beans and brodo with tomatoes, and I can pass on the steak almost. Right, that's how versatile he is and how accomplished he is beyond just what he's famous for. It's a great. He as well. He is my symbol of Italy. In every
he should be on the flag, don't you think?
Oh, definitely.
He's extraordinary. Yeah.
His face should be the flag of Italy. He's in my books too. I feature him in the books as a fictionalized character. Justin, you're done asking questions because they take too long to answer. They're so open-ended.
I have one more also from, and our foundation president must have known that you were going to say Tuscany outside of Campania, because his follow-up question was, last week was Dante's anniversary of the 700th year of his passing. What would be the special Florentine or Tuscan dinner you would cook for him? So he must have known that you were gonna say Tuscany for that follow-up answer.
Dante would have asked Dario to cook for him, so I wouldn't even have the opportunity. Dario recites Dante while he cooks. So good question, Joe. I would go to Dario and ask him what ingredients he had, and then work from there and freestyle a little bit. I would freestyle. He's a poet. We would understand.
Yeah, it would depend on what was fresh that day.
Exactly.
Cool. Those are great questions, and tough one on the Dante. Wow. But let's pivot back to a previous a bit we were pursuing, and I admire your modesty and sort of not recognizing all that you had done personally over the last year to help restaurants. You dedicated a ton of your time and resources. I mean, every time I turned on TV or Zoom, there you were making carbonara or helping someone raise awareness and funds at your own time. So your generosity over this last year is worth noting. One of the things that I admired watching you do in person, right, at my book release party a few weeks ago, but also on TV, was instruction. Right, you're a really good cooking instructor, right? And I hadn't seen you do much of that in the past, right? So I watched you roast a chicken one night, for 800 people on Zoom, right? And it looked like you were really enjoying yourself. But has your relationship with food and the way it's conveyed changed over the past year?
I think you can tell that my relationship with food has definitely added a lot to my life in the past year. For those of you who are worried about the COVID-19, I gained the COVID-19 every month. So I ate carbonara, I think, for 30 or 40 nights in a row last March and April, because that and Negronis with a lot of gin in them were the things that were keeping me somewhat sane. The relationship with food that I have is pretty broad, as you noted, and it's fun to be able to go and pick and choose which slice of the pie works for me at the moment, and fun to be able to go, swing like a pendulum from healthy to indulgent, and also able to teach people how to make both. I find very fun, because most people expect me to talk about healthy food at this point, which usually is very disappointing to most of them. And I thought in the middle, in March or April of last year, on these Zoom calls that you talked about in these Zoom classes, there's no way I was going to bring up healthy, even though most people were probably trying to figure out how to eat healthy, like you did, Andrew. I mean, you sort of did a mini transformation. Not that you needed it, but you definitely, upped your level, up to 99% if it was 95 before. And a lot of people were doing that, but a lot of people weren't talking about that. I think people really needed to know how to cook simple dishes that they could make from, and I hate to bring it up, but the pantry items that you were sort of stuck with, because let's not forget, in March and April and May, we couldn't find toilet paper on the shelves and water. And so most people had, bacon, eggs, and cheese around, which is why I chose carbonara, because it's super easy to make with bacon, egg, and cheese. It's basically our BEC sandwich in a bowl. The American version of the bacon, egg, and cheese pasta is the bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich. And I thought it'd be very easy for people to, understand how bacon, egg, and cheese could work in a pasta dish as well. And it also only required those 3 or 4 ingredients that I think most people had around. So it was a lot of attention, not only from me, but from people who were asking me, from City Harvest or whatever charity I was doing the event for, to use ingredients that were very familiar and very easy to get, because there's a lot of sensitivity to the fact that people couldn't get ingredients, right? I mean, that only changed May, June, July, maybe if that. So that's why I was focused on very, very simple foods. It turned out everybody loves carbonara, so I ended up doing that demo many, many times. Yeah, and a roast chicken is another one, right? It's a simple dish that a lot of people don't feel comfortable doing because it seems too difficult. It turns out it's very easy, and I do enjoy the instruction part of being a chef. So as a chef, you're a cook and a teacher, and you're both of those things all the time. You're simultaneously doing both things for your entire career. The minute you say, I'm now in charge, I'm a chef or a sous chef, the minute you're in charge of even a station, you have to teach others how to do what you're doing so you can do the next thing. And so you're always teaching. And I was a teaching assistant in college, and I assisted with the food classes. I did it in both the CIA and Boston University, where I attended school. And it's always been one of the more joyful parts of cooking for me. It's really, it's just really fun to share what you're passionate about, whatever it is. And luckily, many Americans want to learn how to cook and have jumped on the, I want to learn how to cook bandwagon in the last 20 years. So it creates a lot of opportunity for guys like me.
Yeah, I'll say it. And yes, certainly in the last 20 years, but much more so in the last, 13, 14 months, right? I mean, part of it was necessity, right?
Yes.
Part of it, I think, and what I'm curious about your thoughts on is that there's just, I believe, a greater appreciation for the value food has in our lives, not just as a matter of survival, right? But as a matter of wellness, of joy, of pleasure, etc. And we were getting there, right? We were talking about the Italians before who own this, right? This philosophy of sorts, right? This ethos, right? Do you think this past year is going to sort of jump that quicker into the American psyche?
I do think that the experiences of the past year will stick. A lot of it's going to be very sticky, and a lot of people are going to continue to cook. And I think, for better or worse, a lot of people are going to remain home even when they have the option to go back to work. And part of that is they like being at home and like spending time with their family, and they like not traveling so much, and they like being home for dinner, and maybe they cooked a few times too, or just encourage the other members of their family to cook. And when a family cooks, there's a lot of joy and memories that are created. And even if you're cooking simple food, or even if you don't know how to cook, there's something very special about a group of people who live together also nurturing each other with food, as we all know, because we come from such rich backgrounds where our heritage is all about that, right? But I don't know if the average American has felt that. And I think this pandemic forced a lot of people to get into that uncomfortable sort of area where you had to prepare for yourself. I mean, there were times where there was nothing open, literally nothing open. You couldn't even get takeout. In New York City, we were a ghost town for quite a while, for a couple of months. And I remember digging in my pantry and looking at the canned tuna and the canned sardines, and trying to figure out how to be creative with the beans and all those dishes. And thankfully, I love all that food. But I think there's a certain amount of unexpected joy that was derived from everyone forced to be home. And then there were, of course, many divorces, but we don't have to talk about those. Some people didn't enjoy it so much. But for those of us who made it through and who have cooked together, I think there's no question we're going to continue. I hope we continue it. I think it's one of the better, most enjoyable and most joyful parts of life is eating together with, sitting at a table, eating together. And yeah, of course, the bright, the silver lining was that we got to do more of that, and we were forced to do it. And a lot of people are now talking about how, they didn't realize they missed that part of their life.
Yeah. That said, I, for one, will be running to restaurants as soon as they're fully open, etc.
Yeah.
What's the first place you're gonna go when it's safe to go back in the water?
It's my favorite place. You and I have talked about this a lot. It's Balthazar. It's a restaurant that just reopened this week. It's on
I heard
Prince
that.
and Crosby. Prince and Crosby. They have my favorite seafood platter. It's a triple decker. It's got about 150 pieces of things. And in fact, it's the perfect amount of food for you and I to share with at least one bottle of wine. It's literally made for guys like you and me to sit down and just attack for 3 or 4 hours.
We say we order 2 of them, and we'll send the OSDIA helicopter to get.
Yes, let's do that. Let's do that. Yeah,
that'd be great. Yes, that I'm really looking forward to things like that. And I really thank you so much for your time here tonight. I need to go back to Justin to see, just to make sure we're not going to get in trouble if we don't ask any more questions.
No, I think,
any questions are fine.
I think at this point we'd be here another hour if we wanted to go through them. So
I think we need.
There you go. There you go.
Awesome. Well, Rocco, thank you so very much. Justin's going to show some information on the board about how you can find out about the OSDIA. Before he does so, and we come back to the screen, I wanted to just make sure that all of us were keeping up on what you're doing now, Rock. What's next?
Well, first of all, I want to congratulate you on your book. Okay. And Dr. Mary also has a new book, right?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Is it right behind you, Andrew?
Mine is, so is Mary's.
Yeah, cool. Congratulations. I know what it takes to write a beautiful book, and you guys obviously it's a tough time to put out a book, so congrats and good luck, and hopefully they sell well. Next for me is another book that I started working on that I'm due, Andrew, in 2 months. It's due in 2 months, so you know what that feels like. Yeah. And there may be some interesting projects like a restaurant in my future. I wouldn't say that the pandemic has created opportunities, but there's certainly a shift that occurred that resulted in some opportunities that were unexpected. So hopefully I'll be able to take advantage of some of those.
So then we definitely have you back on us in order to share that.
Yes.
When it's safe to share.
Or maybe a field trip at some point.
Oh,
yeah.
Yes.
Of course, this book was released a year ago this week or last week, so I'm still pimping this one.
and Rocco, before we move on, where can everyone find your book or your
Amazon,
okay,
wherever books are sold.
Okay, fantastic.
You're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter.
Yeah.
Easy to find. You got the blue check. We know.
My favorite way to enjoy books actually is iBooks, Apple iBooks. They're great for cookbooks. It's great to have the recipes handy on your phone so you can screenshot them and share them. You can also excerpt them now, which wasn't possible before. So, and they're half price.
So sit tight for a second, Rocco. Justin's going to tell the audience a little bit about the Order Sons and Daughters of Italians in America. Then we'll come back and say goodbye.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andrew. Well, if you're interested in becoming a member of OSDIA, you can go to osia.org. Click on the locations and find your nearest local lodge, or hit the member tab and sign up directly as an at-large member online. If you have any questions, feel free to send us an email at nationaloffice@osia.org. And please follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Pinterest.
I was retweeting Andrew's post and I was having a hard time finding your Twitter. So I'm glad now that I can see it. Sons of Italy. Got it.
Sons of Italy. That's right.
Yeah. There's some underscores there too. Awesome. Well, thank you so very much, Rocco. We appreciate your time.
Really my pleasure. Thank you, guys.
The audience of the OSDIA was thrilled to have you on here. I'm sure they're all wildly familiar with who you are, and getting to know you better, I think, is something that I've enjoyed over the last year. And I'm really glad that they've had the experience as well. So thank you all for joining us tonight. They'll be back next week with another episode, Mary, correct?
Next week is our last episode. So stay tuned. Last episode of the season.
Be sure to tune in next week, and we will be in touch again.